Cassie Benedict, Director of Outreach Services.
Hi, everyone. I'm Keith Ritchie, Assistant Director of Outreach.
And welcome to Coffee with Kia, where we spill the beans on all things financial aid. Our second installment today is latest Better FAFSA, Better Future news. So today we're coming to you to tell you all the things that we have learned, all of the evolving information, all the updates for the Better FAFSA, Better Future opening 24-25 FAFSA. Any day now, Keith. It's opening December 31st. We have gotten word on that, but there's been several other things that we've learned in the last couple of weeks. And so if you're a college access professional, today is a great episode for you to catch up on all the things that we've learned since you got trained by us earlier on in the semester. So we're going to start out by doing a little coffee talk. And Keith, our coffee talk today is, we have been traveling the state of Kentucky.
Yeah, we've been burning up the road.
Burning up the road. It harkens back to our days when we were on the road and we lived out of our car. And if you went to lunch with us, you would know our cars are nasty.
Yes.
In my car is where fast food bags go to die.
Yeah.
So we've been living on the road, doing all these FAFSA trainings. Give me a recap, a funny story, an anecdote, something that happened in the last 6 months of training that stands out in your mind.
Well, it's been a whirlwind because I feel like, we've done so many of these, and It seemed like every week we had something new to add or to edit as, new updates came in from the FAFSA. But I always feel like some of my favorite moments being on the road with you during this stretch of FAFSA trainings, I know this sounds weird, but it's usually when things go awry and like nothing's working out, like tech-wise.
Which is frequent.
Right, absolutely. So it's not like we have a team of people here to like handle us on the road.
We're a two-man show.
Right,
My rider does not include anybody but me and you.
Right, yeah. So when like we'd have a tech issue or whatever, one of us would be frantically like searching like the back of some auditorium, the others trying to keep the thing moving along.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I feel like if we had like a team of people following us around, recording us as we did this 6 months of FAFSA trainings, there'd be a lot of like moments where something's not working, one of us is up on stage doing our thing, and then we realize like it's really because I'm standing in front of the outlet that Keith is looking for that's going to start our whole bit. Like it's usually like something like that, something very comedic. I think about, we had so many scheduled that we got in the groove, and if you've ever given presentations, you do it a couple of times and then it's just rote memory,
right.
And you're like thinking about your grocery list while you're giving the presentation.
It's multitasking. Right.
That's not true at all. I'm always only thinking about what I'm doing. But you're doing that, and we got so used to doing it as like a two-man team, and then there were so many scheduled that there were times where like you would be in one part of the state giving a training and I'd be in another part of the state giving a training, and I would get to a place where like, I'd pass it on to you, Keith.
Insert
and now
from Keith.
Right, exactly. Like we got so used to our routine, our in our own heads comedic routine. We're our own best, we're our own biggest fans. But and then he wouldn't be there, and so I would be like, well, the reason why I didn't just go around to the next slide is because I'm used to somebody else handling the slide. Yeah. Like, I just flip the slide and then I go to the bathroom and check my phone, and everyone's just waiting on me to come back.
And I will say, like, anyone who was a part of any of these trainings, I'm just going to apologize. If you were part of one where people were laughing at some of our jokes, y'all shouldn't have encouraged us, because then we would try to just get that laugh a little bit more. So,
never encourage. I fancy myself a comedian when I'm in these and people laugh and I'm like, they like me.
Right.
And then it just escalates from there, and it's never pretty. It's never pretty. So, okay, we mentioned it earlier, Keith, but a huge announcement came out in November about the opening date of FAFSA. So there's been some rumors in Kentucky, some nasty rumors, that the FAFSA is opening December 1st.
Right.
So first up, dispel those rumors for us, and secondly, what was the big announcement?
Yeah, so first off, December 1st is is not happening with the FAFSA. In fact, federal student aid announced in November that it will open by December 31st. So effectively, us at Kia, the way we hear that is we are rolling with the idea of December 31st being the opening date. You'll hear a lot of our outreach counselors talk about this, Cassie and I as well. When we're going around, to me, if this thing opens up at the tail end of December, the way I look at it is it's really January is going to be our big month of really highlighting the FAFSA. And let's say this thing opens up a couple days before the end of the month, instead of December 31st. The way I look at it, if any of you all have ever helped with a FAFSA workshop the first day or two that this thing opens, it can be tricky, to say the least. A lot of tech issues, a lot of people are on that website at the same time.
Right.
So the way I look at it is, let's let other states work out some of these kinks, and then
we're looking at you, Louisiana.
Yeah. Right. And then we'll come back in January after break. The outreach counselors will be back. The college reps, a lot of them will be, they may have a little more availability to help out with some of the workshops that are around the state. So the way I look at it, let's really just set our sights on the month of January as being our go-to FAFSA month this year.
So no New Year's Eve FAFSA parties in your house this year?
I don't think so. Okay. I will probably be asleep by 9 p.m. So.
Sleep? We don't sleep. Okay, so if, our staff, a fun thing that our staff does every year, and I think a lot of people do this, is in January we set words of the year. And it's kind of like our intention and the outlook for our year. If FSA set a word of the year this year, that word would have been delay. And I say that because some of the news coming down the pike, some of the updates we've heard over the last few weeks, there's going to be a delay in the processing side of the FAFSA, of the 24-25 FAFSA. So really what that means is a student's going to file their FAFSA. They're going to immediately get their FAFSA submission summary. It's going to have an SAI on it. It's going to have their Pell estimate. But communication from the college, and even, us, in terms of state aid and things like that, is going to be delayed. So talk to me, Keith, about a little bit of a timeline. Like, what are we looking at? A student files their FAFSA. When are they going to hear anything? If it's delayed 4 weeks, are they going to hear February 1st? Like, what do you think?
I personally, everything's going to get pushed back is the way I look at it. I don't want to paint us into a corner of saying, well, by this date, everything's going to be working and up and running.
I don't think we have that information.
Right, we don't know. But all I can say is, just have that patience and go through the process. As long as we are in line with the FAFSA completed, that's really, to me, like the biggest priority. Let's get as many folks as possible in the line, and then we'll sort through it as we go. I think, from what I'm hearing from a lot of colleges, some are considering pushing back certain deadlines on their end as well to help accommodate some of the changes to the time frame. But the way I look at it is none of that impacts the fact that we need to start focusing on FAFSA completion in January, February, March. Let's try to knock out as many of those as we can.
Just keep our eyes on that. Yeah. What about verification? Like, what are we looking at? What have we heard about verification?
So, still some things up in the air along those lines, but I will say this, my understanding, because of all of the changes to like the automated part of the FAFSA and, the fewer financial questions being on the actual FAFSA itself because of the direct data exchange, I think it is somewhat, possible to predict that maybe fewer people will be selected with verification.
I agree with that.
One thing that stands out to me is because of all these automated factors going into the FAFSA now, I feel like anytime we override those with some manual information, probably going to get some follow-up stuff. Yeah. One thing in particular that I'm thinking about is the way the family size gets reported on the FAFSA.
Right, that override.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It essentially assumes that whatever your tax return had, that's the family size, and then you have the option to say, no, wait a minute, it's not. And then it basically allows you to manually put in a number of what that family size should be. Anytime that's going to stray away from what the IRS is pulling in information-wise, I think we're going to have some follow-up.
I agree with that. And what we're hearing, too, is that, if processing of the FAFSA is going to be delayed, that's also going to delay verification notification. And so, students historically would file in October, here just maybe sometimes even as early as 4 to 6 weeks later, oh, you've been selected for verification. So that was happening kind of November, December. This year, we're looking at much later in the process. And so a couple of like rumors and stirrings we've been hearing is that there is the potential to waive verification or certain verifications the way they did with COVID. You know, with COVID, they were trying to reduce impact on our most at-risk students, and one of those hurdles is verification. And so verification was waived across the board for certain classes of verification, certain types of verification. So we may be seeing that again. I could very much see that being a possibility.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, anything that we can do to make this process easier on students, given the changes, I think that, you know, I think that's certainly, you know, I'm hopeful that some of that stuff might come to fruition.
I agree. And now a word from our sponsors.
Do you need help paying for college? Your first step is completing a FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. The 24-25 FAFSA will be available in late December 2023 and is more user-friendly. More students will be eligible for aid than ever before. Kia counselors and others are ready to help you. You're not in this alone. For more information, use the QR code or text money to 800-928-8926. Or you can visit gearupky.org/money.
All right, Keith, so after the break, we were talking about FAFSA changes. We were talking about the updates since our trainings. Now I want to ask you, one of the biggest concerns we hear in the field when we're talking to college access professionals, school counselors, things like that, you know, these students are setting up their FSA IDs, and that's happening even before the FAFSA opens. We've got connectivity issues in schools. They've got, you know, they block Gmail, they block Yahoo, Hotmail, they block all those frequently used email platforms. We also have like firewall issues and service issues. And so we've got kids and parents setting up their FSA IDs, and they're not getting those text messages. They're not getting those emails. And then now we're going to have to do two-step verification on the FAFSA side as well. We discovered a lovely solution to all of this. Tell us the solution.
Yeah, so it's actually not a new solution. It's been around for a while, this idea of using the authentication app through that FSA ID process. Is this a safe spot for me to come clean with a confession?
Tell us.
I've always skipped this thing at a lot of FAFSA workshops over the years.
I'm old. I didn't know what an authentication app was. I just was like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I've always had the school of thought, if it's not required, I'm not doing it as a part of the FAFSA workshop. But
I don't like want them to still mail me a letter.
Right. I would feel
like that might two-step verification is I got a letter in the mail.
Yeah, here it is. Put it in your wallet. Yeah.
6 weeks later, I can finally file my FAFSA.
Right. Yeah. But anyway, you know, I've had a moment where I'm like, okay, maybe this actually has a huge useful purpose
to enter the 21st century.
Exactly. So anyway, I can't speak highly enough about this authentication app set up with an FSA ID. More than anything, guys, it's an insurance policy. So if you lose your password, your FSA ID, it gives you another layer of protection to be able to retrieve that easily and quickly. And I can tell you this, I've had an FSA ID for years floating around. I went ahead and tried this out as if I was just someone locked out their password. I went ahead and set up that authentication app. Y'all, it took about a minute to do the whole thing. When we talk about these authentication apps, all you have to do is you go on to like an app store on your phone or whatever, and it doesn't matter which one you pick. So, you know, there are several different companies out there that have their own version of these apps. Doesn't matter which one you pick. You go ahead and download it, and then there's a QR code that you scan on studentaid.gov. You do that, it gives you a code, and then all of a sudden now you've got another layer of protection to be able to retrieve that password should you ever get locked out.
Two-step verification.
Exactly.
When you log back in. The other thing that's great about that is Keith tells me the story of how he put his phone in airplane mode, he made sure his Wi-Fi was off, and he still got that verification code.
Yeah, you don't have to, you could be totally off the grid and this thing will still connect via these codes. So, you know, again, like you mentioned, there are certain parts of the state where cell phone service not always 100% a given at any particular workshop. So if you have the ability to set up that app, go ahead and do it, because you know, if you should ever need help getting back into that account, you're going to wish you had it.
Yeah, that's, you know, it doesn't translate, it doesn't compute in my brain. Like, how does this stuff fly through the air from the computer to your? I don't know.
Yeah.
not smart enough for that part. Okay, so a huge thing we learned. There was this huge cloud of mystery around getting an FSA ID for a parent without a social.
Right.
And we were told in July, and so at the trainings, if you were at a training, you probably heard us say, like, oh, there's all these ways you can get an FSA ID. You can use your I-10 number. You can do the TransUnion identity verification. I'm not going to say we were wrong, but the information changed. We weren't wrong. They told us, but it evolved into now you can't use your I-10 number to get that employee identification number to get an FSA ID. So what are these parents going to do now? How are they going to do that if that option is off the table?
Yeah. So thankfully, Federal Student Aid did recently a walkthrough of the FSA ID, the new FSA ID process. It'll open up when the FAFSA opens up. Wait, is this going to be aired before the FAFSA? This is before still, right? Okay.
Yeah, this is going to be aired before the FAFSA opens. Yes, it is.
Okay. Where was I before I said that?
I wasn't listening.
You're thinking about your response.
Just leave all this in, Lene. This is good stuff.
Okay.
Checking my mail.
So what we learned through a Federal Student Aid walkthrough of this new FSA ID process, it opens when the FAFSA does. If you're a parent without a social security number, you go to studentaid.gov as if anyone would, you hit register and you start filling out the information. When you get to the part that it actually asks for a social security number, there's a little box that's going to be added to that form that says, basically, I don't have a social. You click on that, and that's what's going to prompt this identity verification process to come through, and it's basically a partnership between TransUnion and Federal Student Aid. Right. The best way I can describe it, y'all know those forms where it'll be like, our records show in 2019 you bought a car. What was the make and model of that car? That's the kind of stuff that this form will ask. And the way Federal Student Aid worded it was that most parents, when they go through that process, should be able to verify their identity through these questions.
Even if they don't have credit, because that was the big question, like what if they don't have different forms of credit? Supposedly they're still going to be able to do this.
Yeah, that was one of the big concerns I had. Well, what if you don't have a credit history, and that sort of thing. But yeah, that was welcome news to hear that even without credit, you should be able, in most cases, be able to use this identity verification process. Let's say if all else fails, let's say you go through that process and they're unable to verify your identity, there's going to be another layer that's been announced from Federal Student Aid where essentially an undocumented parent would be making a call to Federal Student Aid, and it's very similar to the lockout process of any account.
Yeah, almost identical, yeah.
Yeah, so essentially they're going to try to verify as much as they can over the phone, but then they're going to send like a form, and they would have to basically provide some documentation that shows you are who you are. Right. So some examples of that would be like a driver's license. Right. In Kentucky, for instance, you can get a driver's license without having a social security number. So that would be an example. They've talked about like municipality identification. They've talked about utility bills. So there's like a
state
list.
Issued identification cards.
Yeah, so between all of those, that would be a way that someone without a social security number could theoretically set up their FSA ID.
Right.
With that said, there's one thing that I've had some conversations with families and college access professionals over the last couple months about this particular change. I think that, for anyone who helps families through this process, I think we need to be very mindful of how sensitive of an ask this is.
Definitely.
This is something that we've not required parents to do in the past who are undocumented without a social security number to set up an FSA ID. So this is a brand new process.
Put their personal information into a software system that
is a federal government
form, right? It can be anxiety provoking.
Sure. So I think we just all need to be aware of that as we have these conversations throughout the state, that what we are actually asking a family to do in this situation. And we've even asked questions at some of these workshops and trainings over the last few months that were hosted by Federal Student Aid about like what sort of messaging would be appropriate to best deliver this message of the new rules with the FSA IDs. And what we've been told is to make sure we relay the information that the FAFSA is secure, that it's used for just financial aid purposes, that it's private information, they're not using it for anything beyond that. Still think it's something that's going to require a lot of sensitivity and patience through that process, but it's just going to be something we have to get used to.
Right, the verbiage in the law, the legislation says you're submitting this information to be exclusively used for determination of financial aid awards, financial aid eligibility. And so, that's what that's what the Department of Ed is telling us. That should be what that should be the messaging and the communication. So we know it's going to be a sensitive topic. We're ready to counsel. So always refer people to your outreach counselor if if you have a parent who still feels, now would I go out there and broadcast like it's safe, it's fine, just do it? Like, no. But I think that I would feel comfortable counseling around that letter of the law.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So Keith, you still use the I-10 number to do something, right? What is that?
Yeah, so you can still theoretically, like, let's back up and say, okay, what is the I-10? It's a tax identification number. It's given by the IRS to allow folks without a Social Security number to still theoretically file taxes through the IRS. So let's say, okay, fast forward, a parent who happens to be undocumented sets up this FSA ID through that identity verification process. Okay, great. Now we're ready to jump into the FAFSA itself. Well, like any parent, it's going to ask for consent and approval to be able to use this new data, this direct data exchange, where it's pulling IRS information, tax record information onto the actual FAFSA.
Replacing the IRS data retrieval tool that we knew about in the past. Yeah.
And in most cases also replacing this idea of like manually going through your tax returns. So it's one of those things where I think once we get used to this process, it'll make things so much quicker and easier. But theoretically, if a parent doesn't have a Social Security number, but they file taxes, they might have one of these I-10 numbers. So you can actually use that I-10 number to get this retrieved information from the IRS onto the FAFSA.
If you're listening or you're watching, I-10, so it's ITIN, it's an individual tax identification number.
Yep.
There, it was there. I didn't know it was there. It was stored in the recesses. Individual tax identification number?
I'm 99% sure that's what that first I is.
Yeah. Tax identification number.
There you go.
Okay, so you can use that to participate in the direct data exchange, pull those taxes in, avoid having to put it in manually. Remember that manual entry is going to result in an incomplete FAFSA. So one of the changes that came down that we got clarification on, and we feel like needs some clarification for college access professionals, is the parent that a student puts on their FAFSA. Okay, and so we know that before this was confusing, and now now the feds have changed it again, and so we really want to be clear on the guidance we've gotten. So students are going to identify a contributor, a parent contributor, to go on their FAFSA. If it is a situation of divorce, they are going to look at who contributed the most financial support over the last year. And that was kind of what we trained college access professionals on, who gave the most support. But there's a second layer to this, in that when we determine who gave the most financial support, who provided the most financial support, you cannot look at the household that provided the most financial support. You have to look at the biological parent who provided the most support. So if we're looking at it and we go, okay, here's mom and she's remarried, and here's dad and he's remarried, who gave which parent, not which household, okay? So we like to use this example. Mom is the primary residence. Now, in the 24-25 FAFSA, that doesn't matter. What matters is who gives the most financial support. Well, let's say this household is where the student lives and they're making six figures, but there's a biological dad out there, and he's paying child support, okay? So let's say biological mom doesn't work.
Right.
So then if you're looking at the individual biological parents, who contributes the most financial support, well, it's got to be dad if mom is not employed.
Right. Because in that case, we're not looking at the step-parents' contribution and financial support. At this point in time, at that fork in the road, we are simply only looking at biological parent and their financial contribution over the last year.
Right. And so if you hear this the way we heard it, we had a moment where like a little bit of like steam came out of our ear. My glasses fogged up, my steam. I spit my coffee out.
Right.
I won't reenact that for you guys. But we were very taken aback by this clarification. And so we have checked, double checked, rechecked, triple checked.
Yeah.
And it's all true. It's all legit. This is how we identify the parent contributor. Is you separate the biological parent out of the household. You look at their financial contribution, and then you go with whoever provides 50% or more. Then, so let's identify it as dad in the scenario that I was using. That's when we now file the FAFSA and we're contributing to the FAFSA, now we loop in stepmoms.
Mm-hmm. So it's essentially a second fork in the road. So like the best way I can describe it is when you're trying to figure out which parent it is, you have to just like cut out everything else and just simply like zero in biological mom versus biological dad who provided the most financial support. Once you determine that, then the step parent, if they're remarried, would come into the equation. So there's that second, that second fork in the road. Whereas, okay, if we're establishing mom or we're establishing dad, are they remarried? And at that point, that's when we start bringing in the step parent and their income information and the whole 9 yards.
Right. Yeah. So we know that's confusing, and we know that's a change from what we even mentioned when we were giving our trainings all semester. So, definitely reach out to us with questions. Keith and I are still open to you guys contacting us to ask us questions and clarification. And if it's something that we don't feel 100% confident on, I can say this very confidently. If we don't know for certain, we will hunt down the answer. Yeah. And we know because you guys have really put us to the test.
Yes.
You have called us, you've emailed us, and you've said, well, you said that you can do this. Are you sure? And so anytime anyone says that, we go find the words in the law that FAFSA has put out there, that FSA has put out there, and we back up what we've been saying. And so, we're happy to provide any further documentation or clarification on any of these things. You can always reach out to us. But before we go today, I wanted Keith to ask you about other sources of information. So, college access professionals, they're watching this, they're enjoying their coffee with us, and then they say, that was great information, I want more. I want more help, more guidance to help my students out there. What you got for them?
Yeah, so, more than anything, start with Kia Outreach Services. We have outreach counselors in every single corner of the state. No matter where you're standing at any point in the Commonwealth, you're represented by a Kia Outreach Counselor. And we're standing by, and we're ready, and we're willing, and we're able to help through any of this process. Our Kia Outreach Counselors are working hard, establishing FSA IDs at workshops, at high schools and college campuses around the state, and we're going to continue that work when the FAFSA opens up with FAFSA workshops. Right. Another thing that we'll throw out there, even outside of the FAFSA landscape, just remember our Kia Outreach team, our outreach counselors are available to meet with current college students, to be able to speak at parent nights, adult students, you name it. Anyone and everyone who has questions or would like to learn more about resources that are available in Kentucky to help make higher education, trade school, you name it, more affordable, we're here. We're here and available to help. All of our outreach counselors have contact information on kia.com. They can be called, you can text them. We're on social media, pretty much anywhere and everywhere. So if there's ever anything that we can do to help, we're certainly available.
Absolutely. We've got a FAFSA walkthrough video. Yeah. So using the prototype, Keith walked through the FAFSA. That's on our YouTube channel. We've got, if you go to kygoestocollege.com and you go to Better FAFSA Training Center, there's all kinds of resources, YouTube videos you can share, ready-made, pre-written tweets, Instagram, Facebook graphics, handouts you can use. Everything that you might possibly need to support your students through this, it's all out there.
One thing also, in addition to the KY Goes to College, like in terms of the Better FAFSA Training Center that's more geared toward college access professionals, we also have this new website called kyfafsa.org, where essentially your students will be able to go through almost like a roadmap, like from start to finish.
Really is.
It'll like straight up ask, do you have an FSA ID? If not, here's a video on how to create it. Here's the link to go straight to studentaid.gov and jump right into that process. Who is a contributor? am I dependent or independent? And basically it just walks them through start to finish. All the way, once they get to the end of this website, it'll be like, okay, it looks like you're ready to actually complete the FAFSA, and it'll have that walkthrough video that we've recorded, and then a link straight to studentaid.gov to just jump right into it.
And what's that website, Keith?
It's kyfafsa.org. So this is a new landing page for this resource. It's a new resource that we're super excited about.
Yeah, awesome. What final recommendations do we have for college access professionals before the FAFSA opens?
Well, when you're going out there, just remember that as we go through this FAFSA process itself, can't stress enough the importance of shining a light on that FSA ID change, making sure that we try to encourage as many families as possible to set that up ahead of time. It'll make their life and everyone's life a lot easier when it comes to actually completing the FAFSA. And then also, in that same regard, when it comes to actually sitting down and completing the FAFSA itself, just make sure. I lost my train of thought. What was I about to say, Cassie?
You were going to say...
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This coffee is delicious.
Let me start that part over. I was going to talk about FSA IDs. There was something else that I was going to say.
So you go through the process. Do, 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 do.
Yeah, all right. Let me just start that part over.
He'll be getting older for 300 hours.
Yes. All right, can you ask me the question again? Sorry.
No. What was the question?
Lord have mercy. Okay.
All right, Keith, to wrap it up, what final recommendations do we have for our college access professionals out there before the FAFSA opens?
For me, Cassie, I can't stress enough the idea of help us encourage as many families as possible to create their FSA ID ahead of time. If they can do that, it's going to make their life a lot easier when they go into the actual FAFSA. That way, they already have their identity verified, and they'll be able to use that data exchange by granting consent to have IRS information fill out most of this form for us. So we might as well utilize this new technique. The other thing is, help spread the word about some of the changes. If you have current college students on campus who used to get a Pell Grant because of things like that sibling discount going away, where they're no longer eligible for a Pell Grant because of these new FAFSA changes. Remember, the feds have given a little more wiggle room this year to help students through that process. They have given the green light to do things like professional judgment appeals. I know we're going to be spreading the word, not so much to paint anyone into a corner and say, across the board, here's a magic wand and, one size fits all. But just know that if a student on your college campus no longer gets that Pell Grant, our advice is to have them reach out to the financial aid office and at least let them know about the situation and see what can be potentially done about it.
Absolutely.
What about you, Cass? What do you think?
I think that for college access professionals specifically, please keep in mind, we've done this before.
Yeah.
We have gone through FAFSA changes. We've gone through earth-shattering, groundbreaking, life-changing FAFSA changes, and we're still here.
Yeah.
We're okay. Our kids are still going to college. It's okay. So we're going to get through this. It may be muddy. It may be tough, but we're walking it together, and Kia's here to help you. And so we will get through this FAFSA cycle the same way we've gotten through all the others.
And to be totally honest, a little nostalgic about this idea of January FAFSA workshops again. It kind of reminds me of the old days.
I know. I want to file and maybe have snow days again.
Right, yeah.
Awesome. So lots of good information here, but we have more information. So reach out to us if you need help, if you need more guidance, if you need additional support for your students. We're always here. We hope that you will join us next time on Coffee with Kia, where we try and remember what we were going to say to you, and may or may not ever remember it. Thank you so much. We're here to help, and thank you for joining us for your Coffee with Kia.
Cheers.